welcome to the vlog ride home. It's a different ride home today. It's Memorial Day, no work today. It's a long ride, but it's not going to be a video that takes up the whole ride because we're like 2 hours of being on the road. I've not been on the road for 2 hours. I've only been on the road for like 10 minutes going back home. I was on the road for like 2.5 hours. It's cool though. It was a good ride. It's a very good ride. Anyway, so there were a couple of movies that I got to see this year. One of them I was not yet doing the vlogs, and the other I just wasn't sure what about the movie I wanted to talk about. And what I want to do is just kind of freeform it, which is not really unusual for vlogging, but I just kind of want to see where we go. So this is going to be kind of experimental. Right. So the movies are Battle Angel and Detective Pikachu. And I loved both movies. I'm just going to say that right now. I did. I had so much fun watching both of them. Battle Angel I was excited about. When we were at Infinity War and I saw the trailer for the first time, I started screaming in the theater. I was so excited. It was just, I could not believe it was finally happening. That I was finally getting a Battle Angel movie. I have loved this manga since the 90s when I discovered it. I just, started getting into comic books, and I was working in a comic book store. I had discovered manga, and I discovered Battle Angel Alita, and it was just an incredible story. I loved the characters. I loved the world. I loved everything about it. And Japanese stuff was not new to me. I grew up with Robotech. I grew up watching Nausicaa, the movie, the cartoon movie that had come out when I was younger. And I loved both of those just so much. Robotech especially was just not like any other cartoon I had ever seen. Yeah, enjoying manga was not a surprise to me at all. Battle Angel just always had like this special place in my heart, right? And so yeah, when we were finally getting a Battle Angel movie, I was really, really excited. And it was really, really good. I enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun to watch. The visuals were great. I loved how they did her character. I loved that they kept the big eyes and just the aesthetic of how Alita looked in the comic books. I liked that they kept that. I know it looks weird. I got used to it very, very quickly. It looks weird, and I'm very sure that it was probably off-putting to people not accustomed to seeing that kind of art. I loved it. I just loved they kept that aesthetic. And there were so many moments. It has been years. I've not kept up with comic books the way that I would have wanted to. Going to college, having a kid, having a lot of bills to pay is just not conducive to being able to go every week and buy the next comic book or keep up with the graphic novels and stuff like that. So it has been years since I got to read the Alita stories. But what I remember of the graphic novels, the movie was very, very dense, and I want to say that the storyline of the movie I want to say that was like 3, maybe 4 graphic novels. I don't remember for sure. I know it was not just one, because like the whole thing with Ito was like its own storyline, right? Where she is suspicious that he's this killer and all that. That's like one storyline. So there's a whole lot. And so it's very, very dense, but I loved every moment of it. It was really well paced. It moves very, very quickly from part to part. There are not a lot of moments where you're just sitting and waiting for the next thing to happen. It really does take you from moment to moment very well. And I liked how the characters were rendered. I like how the story was translated for the screen, especially making it as dense as they did. A lot of times when that is done with the series, where you just condense a whole bunch of stories into one thing, it does not always work well. It ends up too busy and too confusing. And I thought that they did it really well. I thought that they entwined the stories really well together. And there are just moments that happen in the story and you're like, I remember this moment. Like, even having been like, a decade or so from when I read these, I'm like, I remember the end, like, spoiler, like, huge spoiler. If you do not know the graphic novels and you have not seen the movie, just huge, huge spoiler right now. All right? Are you ready? We good? Have you read or seen it before you do this next part? Okay. So at the very end, after Hugo's gotten the cyborg body and he's freaking out, and he is trying to climb up to the city. I cannot think of the name of the city now, but he's trying to climb up to it, and he's up on the big giant cords that are keeping it tethered, and he's climbing up, and I'm like, oh my god, I know what's about to happen now. I remember this from the comic book. And sure enough, it happens. The thing comes out, and it was so sad. And like, that is the biggest moment that I remember from the graphic novels and how it's rendered in the movie and the comparison wise. But there are a lot of other ones that are just these really great moments that either are like they are in the manga, or are very similar, rendered in a way to be very true to the source material. And I loved it. Like, watching the movie, this was not sitting and watching trying to think of something that I was really familiar with the comic book. This is not getting to, which movie was it that they first put Deadpool in? It was one of the X-Men, and I cannot remember which of the X-Men movies, or it might have been the Wolverine movie, and they put Deadpool up, and he has no fucking mouth. The merc with a mouth has no fucking mouth on his face. Like, the fuck is that? This is not that moment, right? This is not, getting to see this really awesome character that you've been wanting to see, and everybody's been wanting to see them on the screen, and you see them on the screen, you're like, the fuck did you people do? Watching Alita was not that at all. Like, even the stuff that that is different from the graphic novel, like the whole thing with Ito's wife is not, I don't think any of that was at all in the manga. I think she was completely created for the movie. Like I said, it's been years, so I don't remember like all of the bits and pieces with it, all of the minutia, but I'm pretty sure she was not in the manga. And but all of that, even the stuff added in obviously for the movie, or the stuff that is obvious adaptation for a movie, still very much felt like Alita. My only things, the world felt brighter sometimes, but that's just an aesthetic thing, and that is kind of when you're reading something that's like the Alita graphic novels that I read were black and white interior. They had the cover, they had the color cover, but everything else was black and white. So, so a lot of that had, when it came to a lot of stuff, you filled in yourself, how the world looked from black and white to the color of your mind. And so the world felt brighter to me than what I always envisioned, but that's just a me thing, right? That would be like, hating Detective Pikachu because I didn't get to see enough Eevee. But yeah, it's just everything about the movie, even the stuff that is obvious adaptation or is just added in for the sake of it's being on a screen, and so you're doing these things to help, tie in these like 3 or 4 different threads you've got going on, 3 or 4 different individual storylines from the manga that you're tying into one movie. It all still very much felt like Alita. This was not Deadpool on the screen with no mouth. This was my girl. And it was just really great. There were a lot of moments that just, yeah. I was excited the whole time I was watching the movie. I was so in love the whole time I was watching the movie. I loved it. It was really great adaptation. The other movie, also an adaptation, Detective Pikachu. I was really excited to see this, right? I love Pokemon. I didn't get into Pokemon until, sometime after my first kid was born. I don't remember exactly why we started playing it. I think we started playing it so that when our oldest was old enough, she'd be able to play with us. Because when we started playing it, she was not yet old enough to really play cards. But, so, I think that's why we got into it. I don't even remember for sure anymore. But, and she liked the cartoons when she was little. And so I fell in love with Pokemon. I love the card game. I used to love sitting and watching the TV show with my kid, and I would watch the movies with my kids. I cried when Ash dies, and then all the Pokemon tears bring him back to life. I freaking bawled, okay? I cried. I did. There are lots of Pokemon movies that make me tear up and cry. Just deal with it, okay? It is a really great property. And so I was excited to see a live-action Pokemon movie. And, Ryan Reynolds voicing Pikachu, Detective Pikachu, I just thought, I loved that. All the little trailers and teaser things that they would do, I would, when Ryan Reynolds would share them on Twitter, I'd catch them and watch them. And it was just so much fun, the build-up. So I went and I saw the movie for Mother's Day with my oldest, and it was a lot of fun to watch. It was so good. I don't have any complaints about it. The world building was really good. It like with watching Alita and feeling like I'm watching Alita, watching Detective Pikachu, I felt like I was watching Pokemon. They did really well in building and bringing the world to life in a live action setting. There's, you see the Growlithe with the police. There was one shot of the funny looking police cars, and I don't remember if you catch a sight of Officer Jenny or not, but it's like, it is an Officer Jenny car. I remember catching sight of that. the Chancy nurse. There's just all kinds of things that are very much just what you expect to see of Pokemon, whether it's the games or whether it's the card game or whether it's the anime. What you see on the screen is very much Pokemon. So it was really great to watch it, and it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. There was not anything for me to sit and pick out. Like when I saw Alita, I had a lot of things that just popped in my head about feminism and stuff, and her character, and a couple of the things with the plots, and I talked about them on my blog. And I didn't have moments like that with Detective Pikachu. There weren't like pick apart things. It was just a fun movie to go and watch. And it does have, now that is not to say that it does not have its messages, right? Pokemon does. It's kind of funny. A property that gets compared to dogfighting actually has a lot of really good positive messages in it about friendship and cooperation and teamwork. It has a lot of environmental messages that get put in there too. And there are some messages there, some things to pull apart about, science and using science and research responsibly and our responsibility to our world and things like that. There are some messages in there, especially with a character like Mewtwo, who is just... Mewtwo is a lot to unpack. He really is. And I was a little bit nervous because I never played the Detective Pikachu game. So as far as that specific property goes, it's not one I'm really familiar with. So there you go. I'm not familiar with the Detective Pikachu property, so I don't know how these things were utilized in that game specifically. It is Pokemon in general. The other games, the card game, the animated movies and TV show, those are the Pokemon properties that I know, and when I approached the movie, I came at it from. And Mewtwo is a lot to unpack. I was kind of nervous about his presence in the movie. I was afraid it was going to be a little bit too much, because everything about Mewtwo is just really hefty. If you want to talk about, the ethics of genetic engineering and, the ethics of cloning and self-awareness with cloning and all those questions that come with that, all of that stuff is packed so densely in the character of Mewtwo that if there are not papers written about this character, there really should be. Like, he is just all of that, right? And so I was a little bit nervous about Mewtwo being in it, but I was not disappointed. They kept Mewtwo very true to character, even down to his realizations and admittances. Mewtwo is an antagonist often in Pokemon, but he is not evil. And they captured that very delicate balance that's walked with Mewtwo in like the movies and stuff. They captured that balance really well, I thought. So, and there was some talk a little bit with Battle Angel, and I've heard more of it with Detective Pikachu, about adaptation in general. And adaptations can be really tricky. We've seen some really great ones. I liked the Harry Potter movies. Some of it was, there were a couple of places where you're like, that's just really not how it is in the book, and so counter to how this world is supposed to work that it's not even funny. But for the most part, the translation from book to movie for Harry Potter I thought was done really well. I saw Blade Runner before I read Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, but having read the story and having seen the movie, while there is a ton that is different between the two, it is very true to what the story is, in a lot of ways. So, but, to go and dredge up the worst of the worst, Super Mario Brothers was bad on so many levels that it's just not, like, just thinking about the movie makes me cringe, right? Because it's hard to know. There are so many things that are wrong with that movie that it's hard to point at just one thing and go, this is the thing that's wrong, right? Like, which one was it? It was, I think it was Prisoner of Azkaban, where, you've got people doing all kinds of magic and stuff without their wands, and just, very flippantly doing magic, and you're like, but that's not how magic's done. Like, this doesn't happen. And there were a couple of other, there are other little moments like that throughout the Harry Potter movies where you're like, that's, one, not how it's done in the book, and two, you've kept, the rules and stuff, but these things are counter to how things are supposed to work. The magical physics, if you will, of the universe. That, this is bad. It looks good on a screen, but it's bad. And, when that happens in something like Harry Potter that is otherwise really good adaptation-wise, it's really easy to go, that thing is bad, that's kind of spoiling the scene, or it's pulling me out, or whatever. The Super Mario Brothers movie was just so bad. Like, everything about it was bad. Everything about how they adapted the property of, this video game to a movie was just horrible. Just so bad. And going back to what I said about Alita and about Detective Pikachu, both of those movies, watching them, even knowing what stuff was or was not adapted, or how things were translated, you're watching this, right? I'm watching Alita and I'm like, this is Alita. I'm watching Detective Pikachu and I'm like, this is Pokemon. Watching Super Mario Brothers, this was not Mario, right? This is not even kind of Mario. And I think part of it was that it was very much, obviously, cashing in on the popularity of the Mario franchise, because at the point that movie came out, the only real plot of Mario is rescuing the princess out of a castle. and oops, she's not in that cast, so you have to find another one. The greater universe that is Mario and actual stories and stuff were not really existent at the time that movie came out. And it's like they tried to give it one, and they gave it a bad one, and they did it in a horrible way, and it was just bad. And that's the thing with adaptation, right? You don't have to adapt something true, and have it be absolutely true to what you're adapting. Blade Runner is a great adaptation of Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, even though there are a lot of things that are changed from the story and the movie. The things that are kept are the elements that needed to be there, and the things that are adapted and changed are still changed true to the story that Philip K. Dick wrote. You're not creating something new in order to be able to make a movie of it. You're just adapting what you have so that you have, either whether it's having something different for having a screen adaptation so that the fans of the work have something new to look at and new element, or whether it's, this was going to be more difficult to tell and move along on a screenplay. Whatever the reason for the adaptation, it still works. It is still in line with what the story is supposed to be. And like, the worst of the worst, Mario was just not that, right? When you have an adaptation, the adaptation should still feel like what it is that it's adapted from. And the question was asked, the hope with Alita was, one, that it would do well enough that we would have another, but that it would do well enough that the way it was adapted would become the norm for adapting anime, because it was adapted really, really well. It was so good. And, the aesthetic of anime was adapted over to the screen, and it worked. The story was adapted, and changes that were made worked, especially for having to tie together all of these storylines into one, movie. It all worked really well. And, can that become the norm? I hope so. I think that whether or not we get a second Alita movie, I would really love to have one with the same team that made this one. Whether or not we get one, I hope that the positive lessons from this movie are held on to and applied to other properties that get adapted. The question around Detective Pikachu was, is this going to be the new norm for adapting video games to movies? And Folding Ideas talked about this. Pokemon has an unfair advantage for being adapted, because you have the video games, you have the card games, you have the anime TV show, you have the animated movies. I don't know if there's a comic book, but I would be really surprised if there wasn't. You already have a multimedia franchise that is Pokemon. There is already guides and precedent for how to adapt this property to different mediums. Really, the only worry and adaptation that I had was going from animated to live action. Pokemon's been on a screen. It's had full-length movies for years. What is the lesson you take? the lesson that people should have been taking for years and adapting, and that is, if you're going to make we have known since Super Mario Brothers, at least, maybe earlier, because there may have been video game adaptations even before that. I don't remember. But we have known since at least Super Mario Brothers, there is an interest in Hollywood from time to time to take video games and adapt them into movies. So if you are going to create a game franchise and you are going to mass market it, and you are not thinking to yourself, how would this be adapted to a movie or to a television show? If you're not already asking yourself that question, you are shooting yourself in the foot. Because if your franchise is what is picked up to do that, Assassin's Creed, and you do not have a good answer for doing that, and you don't already have that action plan for how to do that, your adaptation is going to suffer. And I think that if we're going to take a lesson for how to adapt, it's that the people who hold these properties need to look at doing what the Pokemon Company does with their properties. The Pokemon Company already knows how to adapt what they have from one medium to the other. It's there. And if you think there's a possibility that you may want to pursue that, or that somebody may want to option you for that, or if it is just a dream that you have, it can be a pipe dream. Who cares? Have a plan, because if it happens and you want it to be good, the lesson of Pokemon is that's what's got to be there. You've got to have that plan. You've got to have those threads for adaptation. Pokemon has them. And, if there's not that thread there, then you follow the lesson of Alita and you go, what's the look and feel? What is it that people love about this kind of property? And you figure out how to adapt that to the screen. And you figure out how to bring that look and that feel and that aesthetic over. Because you should not be surprised at how much aesthetic builds. And if you have the aesthetic and then you have everything else, you have the plot and the characters that people love, you're golden. That was done with Alita, and it can be done with other properties, and there's really no reason it shouldn't be. So there you go. That's our talk about adaptation. What I loved about these two properties, that about Detective Pikachu.
Ahead.
Sorry. That is what I loved about Detective Pikachu and about Battle Angel, is how these properties were adapted and just brought over to either the big screen, period, or to live action. It was just beautiful. So, and by the way, I will say real quick, Alita was manga, but it already did have its anime adaptations. So there was like with Pokemon, there was already a kind of guide to helping that. That has not always helped other past properties, but yeah, it helped Alita, and attention was paid to how things were adapted before, from manga to anime. That's the lesson that creators need to take. Have that action plan, and have those threads, and then for the people who want to adapt it, understand what makes it, and make sure that you carry that over. So, I'm out of time for the vlog. Still got a long ride home, so, but peace. If you like this, you know how it goes. like, share, subscribe, follow me on Twitter, and have fun.